Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we bring you stories that we definitely remember. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Seth, you want to give us a little recap and we'll chime in as we definitely remember what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to remember because it's such a unique story.
We're not in any way busy at all. We definitely remember everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump right into it. I mean, I think in the first episode, we established that there was like these three brothers, and they, I think it was kind of like a animal kind of personification kind of story. They were pigs. They were these pig brothers, right? And they'd kind of grown up, and they were going to leave the house.
Story.
And I think,
Seth,
you know, what?
Seth, that's next week.
Next week.
Is the big bad wolf who'd huff and puff and blow their houses down. Or are you talking about that one?
Yeah. See, you remember.
Yeah.
No,
we're definitely not. We're not going to plagiarize.
Did you pick a name for this story?
No, I've not. Reed, do you have any cool ideas? All right.
The Golden City on the Hill. Just thought of it.
So, the first week I had prophecy, which was less of a prophecy and more of the idea of secret knowledge. We developed this into basically there were people who had sort of an ability, whether that was to tell the future or whether that was to understand things, and that the government had kind of secreted these people away and decided to basically remove them from the population and then build up a religion around their secret knowledge. I think the country was kind of like a burgeoning country that had come to being out of a result of war. And that war was kind of between two countries, and there was kind of a messiah type figure who had risen up to sort of unite slaves and disenfranchise people. And then here, hundreds of years later, or thousands, who knows, this person was kind of worshipped as a messiah figure by the government type, and which is what Seth had originally. And then Reed had something based on a book he's reading, which he had been reading, Anarchy and the Religions of the Future, and his thing was about being deceived, knowing you're deceived. If you deny that you are deceived, you are the one who is most deceived.
That's a pretty good recap. The orthodoxy and the religion of the
future.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I was going to say anarchy. Ooh, that would be another interesting one too. But
no, not anarchy. I'm sorry, I've got anarchy on the brain.
But I kind of enjoyed that Seth also mentioned, like, this messianic figure that was the figurehead of the government. All goods and property, of course, were to the collective authoritarian centralized power structure.
Right.
And they built a story of fanatical loyalty, to the dear leader, I guess I'm going to call him.
Right. And some people right now in the government, some of his original cohorts are still helping to run the government, or are they? It's sort of 1984-esque, where they're hiding the information that it's really been like a very long time since the revolution happened. And they keep replacing and changing the information, so it seems like to everyone else that the changeover happened like hundreds of years ago now.
Yeah.
This country is kind of cut off a little bit like North Korea from most people, and in some ways because of the fact that they are kind of so backwards, and in some ways due to the fact that these people are they still think that like the war is just over or could start at any minute, and so they're very militarized.
Yeah. And then the second episode, my story element was villain sidekick, and I introduced a character. I called him Mr. Reynolds, and I just said that he is like got a remarkable ability to keep his nose clean, and by projecting an image of kind of being the one in the know, he draws people who want to be in on the game, kind of creating wheels within wheels, and he seduces others to do his dirty work. Among the keepers of the secret knowledge, he has kind of learned to implicate his ambitious rivals in plots and schemes in kind of the jostling for position, all the while kind of staying above the fray. And he's a kind of a conniving and slippery kind of guy, but without appearing to be slimy, right? He's just really good at keeping his nose clean. and we kind of came to the conclusion that the real villain is just this kind of this controlling system.
Right.
And he's literally like the sidekick because he doesn't want to be the figurehead, but he's kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Right. He serves the system as a whole, and so he can't be the villain because the system would exist without him.
Yeah.
Right. Reed, who is your, Seth, who is your anti-hero?
The anti-hero from the second one was one of the citizens here that was, I was thinking, in part of a military thing, but then had escaped. But he's got kind of the secret back door, either tunnels that he had dug or, somehow knows a secret way into the city.
Yeah, I think you called him Clarence. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the famous person.
But he's kind of disillusioned by what the city's been preaching, because obviously he's kind of, lost the indoctrination there. But also at the same time, the world outside of that place is like also not any better.
Right.
And so he's kind of reluctant to get too involved with, one of these new countries either. But I think we established that then he kind of lives out in the boonies, grows a bunch of food and stuff, and then you had a character that kind of comes in and out, that possibly that's one of the connections that he has to...
Right, he's kind of like I don't remember his name, but he's kind of like he was the famous person, that was the element that I drew, and he kind of meddles in both worlds, right?
I've written down that he's Isaiah, and he's a baker by trade.
Right.
I wrote my notes say he walks a place of power because of competence, and he has connections with the outside due to his supply chain needs. People like his product, but he's got to, the show's got to go on. So it's, he's right in basic day-to-day reality, providing a product that people demand. So, and he employs a bunch of people. This Clarence, he's got connection with a baker because he's a part of the supply chain.
Right, kind of a necessary person who has to survive because of necessity, but also because he has fame, and so it's really difficult for people to make him disappear if he speaks dissident word or thought. It's like you can't really get rid of him because so many people rely on him. So he kind of has a little bit of freedom to say things that other people might not be comfortable saying with an oppressive system like what we're seeing. All right. What did you guys have for this week?
I have unique artifact.
And unique weapon.
And I have wild card hero. So I want to hear about the artifact and the weapon before I talk about the hero.
Okay.
And remember, this is our third episode. So typically these stories have been going on for 3. So we should start, as we talk about these and start introducing these, we should start figuring out how they will what the current problem is, what problem we want to solve, or what problem we want our good guys to work towards solving anyways.
Okay. The unique artifact is somebody finds this thing. And it could be the hero. I was thinking that, or it might be Clarence, the anti-hero. That would work, or even Isaiah, But what it is a kind of a clever. It's a universal pass key, and it can unlock any door or cupboard or drawer in the Hall of Records. And there are all of these vaults and these cupboards and these drawers and the rooms. They've got kind of an elaborate locking mechanism, and it's supposed to be unforceable. But anyway, apparently there's a template made of the universal pass key that is supposed to be just very carefully controlled access, and somehow this universal pass key fell into the hands of I'm going to say the hero. It makes more sense than anything else. And so the thing is that's difficult, of course, is to arrange circumstances so that you can make use of it. But the plus side is here for people like that's starting to smell a rat. The secret information that could shine the light on this whole regime that's been, the big cover-ups, and so to speak. So this could be it could be kind of a game changer.
Yeah. Do you want me to say who the hero is, or do you want to go on with unique weapon, Seth?
Oh, yeah, I can do the unique weapon. So the unique weapon, I think no one has seen it for a while, and so there's a lot of legend to it. I think it's something that then the people in power in this city kind of, I guess, spoiler alert, pretend like they have. It would have been, in kind of myth or what they say about it, it would have been like the, I don't know, like the sword of truth, as they call it, that their hero figure would have wielded. And it was said to, glow of like shining light, and it would, call, all, people to itself. It would, just the sight of it would, make the enemies fall down and surrender or come to their side, which was happening during this war when they would try to put this kind of rebellion down. They'd send troops against them, and then they would just kind of come over to the other side, and it was just kind of like a radical movement they couldn't understand. And I think this is partly the key to it. And they say that this figure will return or whatever, and he'll wield his weapon. However, ultimately, what it is, it's just simply like it's like a radioactive rod. It's not like a weapon of any sort, but it's just either like a staff or a shorter rod, but it has I say radioactive, it's not necessarily radioactive, but with the idea I think that we set up with some of like the color or this like ability, maybe this like psychic ability, it might be kind of on those lines, but it does in fact kind of do that. It doesn't exactly shine, but because of what it does, that's how it's described. But it would, the wielder would be able to, maybe if they had the right tone of this other power or whatever it was, use it as a, I guess it's kind of like a mind control, or to like project their opinion or their belief like over to other people, so long as you could see it, you were within range of seeing it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, that's what it is.
Gotcha.
And that would explain why then all these people that would come against him at first were all drawn to their, quote unquote cause. And it gained so much traction at first is because whoever that hero figure was, he had this, and he wielded it. And perhaps it's like, I don't know, maybe it's the handle of the, the baker's favorite, the little paddle that they put the bread in and out of the oven with. And it just, I don't know, maybe that's what it just kind of, when he uses it, like it just makes the perfect bread, and everyone's kind of drawn to his bakery, or like, or, maybe one of the other generals have it right now. It would be something like that, where it's kind of just part of a benign object. Like the people in charge of the city, they don't have it, but they did have it, but either in the war when the guy would have died, it got lost. So it's around somewhere. And so I think either someone does have it and they don't know what it is, or maybe they do have it and know what it is, but they can't use it. One of those two things.
Okay, interesting. I like it. One of the things I was thinking of is maybe they do have it, but they've used it too much, and now people have sort of naturally people have like gotten used to it, so now it doesn't work as well.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I like that.
I'll introduce the hero. That's fine. I don't necessarily like it as that much either, because it's, we can disagree. We can disagree as long as we can agree at the end that I'm right.
That you're right, that my idea was better?
Yeah, that you're right, that your idea was almost as good as mine. I'm going to introduce the hero because it will definitely throw a big old wrench into all of our plans. First, though, a question. Who is the hero of the book 1984?
Oh.
Do you think it was Winston?
Yeah, I would. I would think it's Winston.
What do you think, Seth? Who is the hero of the book 1984?
I'm not sure that it has a hero. He's the protagonist.
That is the question. There was no hero of 1984. Do you know who the hero of 1984 is, Reed? You are the hero of 1984 because you've read the book. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's true.
So
why I wear the shirt.
This story that we are writing here has no hero. You, the reader, are the hero of 1984. I mean, of this story. You are the one that all of our anti-heroes, our famous person, anyone trying to do good, anyone trying to spread the truth. And I think this is a sad ending story. Anyone trying to preserve truth, anyone trying to stand up for what is right, anyone trying to fight evil is the hero of this story. You guys tell me if that's terrible.
No, I think it's got some real possibilities. I like this.
And
We'll go with it.
Here I think is the kicker. I think by the end of the story, I think I want the characters that we know. So right now we have two characters really, right? We have this Isaiah, is that what I had his name as?
Yep.
And Clarence are both sort of trying to preserve human thought and trying to fight against the oppressive system in their own way. And at some point in time, they become familiar with the writings. Maybe they were forgotten, maybe they're found, of this original Messiah figure, right? And his text, which has been twisted completely out of context, by the state church and by the government, speaks to someone else who watches us. Basically, it's a book that becomes self-aware that it's a book by the end. What do you guys think of that? I have another hero I could pull out of my hat if you wanted to as well.
No, I kind of like it.
I mean, with that in mind, and the 1984 idea, like not to rush towards the ending, but like how would it look? Like, okay, so it's all building up. So you have like these people, just like in 1984, not to kind of rip off that, but in that same idea, if we're going with that vein, the three people that run the government, right, that kind of pull all the illusion.
Yeah.
Eventually, right, how are they replaced every time? Because I think in the second one of the military leaders was staging a coup, right? Kind of take this down, which they needed Clarence to get the secret way in. Well, that's what it is. Every generation or so, 2 or 3 of these people rise up, they go, they overthrow it, but they are the ones that replace it. They have the rod, they have...
Oh, yeah.
Like the things, and they get in and they replace it, but then they are the returning Messiah figure, right? Because they're now wielding the rod. Right. And then it's almost like it plays on itself, where then that's the Messiah figure coming back, but then after a generation, that is the Messiah figure, but then he dies, right? In the great battle, who then his henchmen who come in and helped him have now taken over, right? With this kind of, we've said everything right? And super faithful following, and it basically self-perpetuates itself. And so that is how then all the years have gone by, and they think it's only just happened because it did in fact keep happening, but it's the same thing kind of overlaying itself.
So maybe this whole story is written, there was a story you told me about, Reed, where it was like in and around World War II, where there was like a ghetto, like a Jewish ghetto.
Yeah.
And they were cut off from the world, and there was like a journalist, and he like wrote down everyone's stories, and they like built all these tunnels, and he was the only one who was able to escape. And if he hadn't escaped, then there would be no if he hadn't escaped, then no one would know that this had even happened.
Right. Yeah. Right? Yeah, and it was Mila 18 by Leon Uris.
Yeah.
He was famous for writing the book Exodus.
So maybe this is this same sort of thing. Maybe the hero's sidekick, which is your sidekick, right? Because you, the listener, are the hero of this story because it's a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. And your sidekick, this journalist, escapes from this oppressive system, and the story either begins or ends with, and he's viewed as the hero throughout the whole story, right? Because he's like going around and getting people's stories, and he interacts with Isaiah a little bit, and he, talks. He has to coordinate with Clarence because he needs to get out of the city at some point. Mm-hmm. And he sees this whole thing. I was thinking of 1984, where Winston is walking around, and he is walking by, and there's some proles there. And they mention how this information that's coming out through the speakers and through the newspapers isn't correct, because they've been keeping copies of the newspapers when they're not supposed to. Right? And so in the same way, this journalist, right, who's kind of, maybe his job starts out as being kind of a memory hole kind of guy, kind of like, but he's a journalist. And so one half goes and does journalism and one half does like aggressive re-education of himself, and slowly, he sort of collects these sort of small bits of information and starts to put this thing together. Maybe he goes to Isaiah at some point and like asks him what he should do, trying to find the right way to say it without seeming like a dissident. And Isaiah kind of smiles and talks to him in kind of sideways speech that gives him some information, and he's a journalist. And so he can, go in and interview the top military commander, the last surviving of the Messiah's, personal cohorts. And he talks to him and he realizes and he begins to understand the kind of two-faced broken system that exists. And he sees this coup coming, like you were saying, Seth. He sees this coup coming and he has begun to sort of collect information, and it kind of ends with him, escaping basically as, Isaiah is executed because he fraternizes with the enemy, or Isaiah turns because he sees the rod, and maybe this journalist is blind and so it like has no effect on him. He can't be I don't know. And so he kind of sees this whole thing happening and is able to escape. And then the idea is that this whole thing he's been telling to the border guards of the other countries. He's like, I escaped and this is all the stuff. And they kind of ask like, why you couldn't have done this yourself? Like, you're blind, you're crippled, you're, like, who are you with? Who are you following? And he's like, I'm not with anyone here. This is just a tale for like those who will like come after me. Like, this is for anyone who reads this to like, be cautious of whatever, however that end sort of speech goes. My brain is looking at it like a movie. And so that's kind of, he like has a little he has a little monologue about like, he doesn't know what year it is. He doesn't, just showing the vast amount of information that the government system has removed from him, and then basically setting it up that this place is lost. Like, anyone who reads these words, take heed, like, you are the one who can stand in the way.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, that's I'm thinking of the like the last thing that Alexander Solzhenitsyn published in Moscow before he was exiled to the West, or it was, the title of the article was "Live Not by Lies." You may not have the strength to fight, but just never give your assent to something to be a lie, because tyranny requires lies to bolster itself up.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We've kind of combined like 1984 and that Exodus one you were saying, Reed, and probably, I mean, from what I've read of the Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah.
So this isn't like a heroic story where everything gets turned over. This is just a cautionary tale where the systems of power propagate themselves.
Yeah, if you can control the flow of information, and you can brainwash the children, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, you can lock your system in, and then the whole keepers of the secret knowledge. I think just that is just a chilling idea.
Right, and part of me is thinking that maybe there is a rebellion group, but it's like a rebellion group that's kind of backwards funded by the people who are trying to do the coup now.
Yeah.
Maybe, Seth, the reason why it keeps cycling over and over and over again is because it's something to do with the weapon, right? I don't want to change it too much, but it's something to do with the weapon and its effect. And maybe this is one of the reasons why the original Messiah's, original savior, this Messiah figure, why all of his original cohorts set up this system of finding people who had been changed by this thing, who were susceptible to it, who had some power outside of it. Why they originally set up this system of taking them away from the people is because there was some secret about it. There was some, like, if you force the people to use it, it will be used against you, sort of thing. Like,
right.
Once you enter into using this weapon, you can't just it's like I don't know. Everyone who
I have a slight idea, because it would bring it into like a 1984 idea of just that like perpetual like thing inside of another thing. This whole thing is a the other countries around it. This is a contained space where they test out different revolutions and ideas on the populace. That's why it's walled off. So the guy that's escaping, it's like he's telling the story, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, here, why don't you put your manuscript in here? We'll take that. And, I don't know if it gets to that point, but then it's like, it's revealed right at the end that
it was all part of the plan.
It was all part of the thing. He escaped. So our guy that comes out, and perhaps, he references throughout the thing that he had written it and, sent it, to this other person that he knew of that might, listen. But then kind of at the end where they're like, oh, okay, you've got the manuscript for like all the story here. Is this the only copy? And then he's kind of like, yes. And then it's like, that's lastly. But then you find out that, okay, so then the rod, it's not the person's ideas. These other people program in the ideas, and whoever has it then adopts that as their own, starts the new, let's say, revolution inside of that, revamps this little area. They fight, overthrow something, change a few things to see, okay, what bits of things do people take, what do they not take, and then they can apply it in their own other system. But this is like their little playground for
so it's maybe not two countries, it's like two companies, or one company posing as two countries, and this is just like a giant experimental system used to test, technology, human limits, psychology, all philosophy. Like, it's just a giant playground.
Marketing strategies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it loops. So if basically they have, let's see what society would look before we let these ideas adopt into our society, how would that affect, society if, people could vote for their elected officials or not, or if we, how would they respond, or how quickly would they respond or notice that information is being edited out of the news or changed.
Right. What's the extent that a human being would go to protect their family?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that sounds horrible and that sounds terrifying. I think that's a good idea. That makes me kind of physically ill to think about the fact of a human being doing that to another human being. But it's not beyond the realm of what a human being has done to another human being already. So
yeah, just the seduction of being in control, or having the illusion of being in control, is really powerful.
I had an idea, though, not to turn it into a happy ending, but to turn it into a at some point the cycle will break ending. There's this episode of The Twilight Zone, I remember, where it was like these Marines and like all these Navy SEALs were like quote unquote abducted by aliens, right? And they were like, it was terrifying, and they were basically commanded to take this nuclear warhead, that there was like scientists on the team and stuff, to take it and to what was it? To reprogram it in a certain way, and basically so that it could be used against the humans. And they of course said, no, we're not going to do it. And then they were like tortured. And finally, one of the scientist ladies, she says, I'll do it. And then she messes with it for a little bit, and she goes, okay, it's done. And then all the walls kind of like come aside, and it's like a bunch of scientists and military personnel. And they're like, this was a test to see if you guys would break under pressure. And they're all like, we blah, 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 like telling everyone how much they failed and how, they're just weak and stuff like that. And the girl is like panicking and she's like, we have to leave right now. We have to go. And they're like, what are you talking about? She's like, I programmed that nuclear bomb to go off in 5 minutes. And they're like, it's impossible for you to have done that. We disabled it. And she's like, I built that machine. It's not impossible for me. And then that's where the episode ends.
Oh,
right.
You were so clever.
So my thought, Seth, with your unique weapon is that somehow the journalist gets both the weapon and the universal key and then reprograms it, right? And basically it's kind of like you were saying, like radiation. At first, it's kind of like that. It's like if you're exposed to it, depending on how much you're exposed to it, will say how long you are affected by it. And he's not affected by it at all because it goes in through the photoreceptors of your eyes, and because he's blind. And so he has it in his jacket or whatever. And he, at some point, somehow is able to reprogram it and then just like lifts it up as there's like a bunch of, he's like, at the end of the day, they're like cross-examining him with all like the greatest minds of the world. And he's like a test subject in like a little cage, and they're feeling all happy and smart about the fact that they were able to create this society and look what it created. Just the most pitiful type of human being, He was, so dedicated to the ideas of objective truth. He was so dedicated to the ideas of systems that valued based on like a human being having value instead of the, as we clearly understand it, the ideas of, whatever, however they're picking it apart, how you could imagine a Nazi would teach a how to dissect a live human class.
Yeah.
Right? As horrible as that is, I'm sure that happened, I don't know for sure. I'm just saying that's the type of terrible things. As they're all just sitting there being like, how interesting is this? He just like lifts the rod up and it glows. And then that's the end. And after we've set the precedent for the fact that he maybe was able to reprogram it, and that's how he was partly how he was able to escape, is he was able to like kind of show it, and people would immediately kind of do, like have all of the systems broken in their brain, and they were like all of a sudden sane again, and they would help him. And his kind of final last thing was to just like, I don't know. That's now that I say it, it sounds like a cool idea, but it's not actually that cool. So we need to think of something else. I think maybe if it's just like a sad ending, maybe it's just a sad ending. What do you guys think?
I mean, the idea is cool, but I think maybe, just having it more like 1984 where it kind of loops back into not actually getting there, but you, the reader, see the cautionary tale of it. And
yeah, I so desperately want Winston to be saved and be right and be rescued. And maybe that's just sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's
all right. On that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us for this really upbeat and positive episode. If you like this story, let us know. It's a difficult subject with lots of difficult ideas, and we recognize that everything can't be as good as the last story we did. Not to say that this wasn't good, but it was definitely a little bit more difficult. Join us next week as we discuss our probably really animated and varying opinions on these ideas. And if you have any questions about how our process was, how we got to these conclusions, just send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or add us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. Every story can't be a winner, but just wait, it gets better.